Hi, everyone. Pastor Paul here. Time for my weekly Bible talk where we share what's going on with sort of cultural issues from a biblical perspective. And today we talk about WWJD. Christians love the idea of what would Jesus do, right? Right up until it doesn't meet with our ideological or partisan beliefs. And so today I want to ask the question, what would Jesus do about white supremacy in the church? And that is our topic for this week on Pastor Paul's Bible Talk. Come join me now as we look at cultural issues from a biblical perspective. And I am Pastor Paul on Pastor Paul's Bible Talk, and I'm a little out of focus there. Let's see if we can fix that on YouTube. There we are. Glad you're with me. And today we're going to talk about white supremacy in the church. And I actually think one of the blessings of this season is that we're seeing this heart of Christianity that believes in a cultural supremacy being exposed in this season. Now, I know every Christian I know, and particularly my evangelical friends, no, I'm not racist. So first off, we need to say, okay, there's a difference between racism and white supremacy. And I really like to call it cultural supremacy because I always have white friends that say, no, I'm friends with this person or this person or this person of color. And then quite often I know people of color who are mainly living in the white culture that we believe as white people is the American culture. And by the way, if you believe American culture is our culture and that they are one and the same, you already are saying my culture is supreme to yours. And that is a white supremacist belief. But many of my friends of color, and maybe they don't admit this much, but when they live sort of ingrained in a white culture, many have told me, yes, we do feel like we have to live up to this idea of being that black friend to white people so they can say, I'm not racist, I'm friends with so-and-so. And then those people of color in those cultures feel like some pressure to live better than others so that they can live up to that cultural supremacy in which they're a part of. And it's a horrible thing we're doing. And many of us don't even understand what we're doing, and we're having to learn, and I'm still learning as I go along. But another example, and I'm going to show you in the Bible where this is an abhorrent thing, is the support of Kyle Rittenhouse. I did a video about Kyle Rittenhouse on my TikTok, and it has over 130,000 views or something like that now, and so many comments from white people. Let's be honest, they're just reciting what they hear on right-wing media, but they're saying, no, we love Kyle Rittenhouse because he was accused by the left wing when all he was doing was self-defense, and we think self-defense is important. Or, if somebody's coming after you, Paul, what are you going to do? Are you just going to let them come after you? Or one of my favorites, they'll say, do you know that the two people he killed were both felons? As if them paying their penalties and being out in the culture like the rest of us weren't enough, and they somehow deserved to die because of that. Or the other favorite of mine is Kyle Rittenhouse is a hero because he was saving property, as if it is a Christian belief to say defending property at the cost of lives is a pro-life stance. All right, if I haven't run enough of you Christians off already, then let me go deeper into what I'm saying and why I think it's so important and biblical and from the story of Jesus that we need to be very critical about the cultural supremacy we teach, particularly in the evangelical church from which I am a part, or else we're missing something in the story of Christ. Do you know, by the way, that being a Christian, a Christian, doesn't mean I've said a prayer and I'm going to heaven. Being a Christian actually means I'm one trying to look like Christ. I'm one trying to be a version of Christ. So Christian in America has come to mean I belong to a religion because I said a prayer and I go to a building on Sundays. But the term actually means if you are a Christian, to be someone who is an IAN in the first century would have meant I follow the teachings of this teacher. If your teacher's name was Rabbi Bob, you would be a Bobbian, or Rabbi Fred, you would be a Fredian. And as a follower of Jesus Christ, as a Christian, that means we follow the teachings of Jesus, not we belong to a particular religious race. And that's part of why we miss things. And so when we start to say things like, well, I really am a fan of Kyle Rittenhouse because he defended property, then we're missing that Jesus says, hey, those 2 lives he ended really mattered to God, even if they're felons, even if they're of another race, even if they're of a different religion or cultural mindset than yours. And if you don't agree with that, you just might be a white supremacist. I'm thinking of what that Jeff Foxworthy. You might be a redneck. You might be a white supremacist. And I know white supremacist is a tough word, and none of us want to be associated with that. But let me pique your heart with a challenge, because none of us want to be that. Then we ought to challenge ourselves on a regular basis of what does that look like, and are we part of a religious system today that promotes a cultural and religious supremacy over other cultures, and therefore makes us very similar to the guys in the hoods back in the 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s, or makes us very similar to the religious establishment people that Jesus so confronted in the New Testament? Are you willing to allow your heart to be challenged with the idea that maybe our religious system promotes a cultural supremacy in America today? Let me at least lay it out for you, and you think about it in this Bible talk. So, for matters of race and religious exclusivity, what did those things look like to Jesus in the New Testament? And let's go to the book of Matthew, chapter 22, where Jesus is having a conversation with one of the leaders from the religious establishment of the day. Matthew 22, verse 36 through 40. Here's what I like to do is read portions from the evangelical Bible and then start to challenge evangelicals with their own text. Now, they can mean different things to you and me, but I try to do what Jesus did, is he would take the religious establishment's own scriptural text and say, your scripture doesn't even agree with what you believe. And this is what I love to do to evangelicals. This is what your text says. And even though I believe it a little differently than you do, I can even use your text to prove that you're wrong. So let's do that in Matthew, the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 22, verse 36 through 38 or 40, maybe even. It says, teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law? So here's a religious guy coming to Jesus, calling him a teacher or rabbi, which would have been the term of the day. So he's giving him deference and then asking the question. So we don't know if he was challenging with this question or like he legitimately wanted to know. And he comes and he says, teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law? And he's talking about the Mosaic law that was given to Moses on the mountain, on Mount Sinai, and was being lived by still in the culture in which Jesus walked and operated. Verse 37 says, and he, Jesus, said to the man who asked the question, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. And this is the great and first commandment, said Jesus. Then he goes on to say this, and second is a commandment like it. He says, here's another commandment this is the biggest one. And now here's one that's like it. It's right by it. They're right there together. And the second is like this, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these commandments depend all the law and the prophets. So this man comes to Jesus and says, what's the greatest commandment of the law? Jesus says, love God, love your neighbor as yourself. They're right there together. Where the original law would say, no, loving God is above all else. Jesus is saying these are one and 1A. Love God, love your neighbor as yourself. And he goes farther. Not only does that define all of the law, but the prophets as well. So all of the teaching around the law, all, and for Christians, those who say, I'm trying to look like Christ, everything you read, no matter what your interpretation of the Bible is, Jesus said, it all comes out of this. Love God, love your neighbor as yourself. 600 laws in the Mosaic Code. He's saying number one is love God, and then right next to it is love your neighbor as yourself. And love God is, he was quoting the book of Deuteronomy, love your neighbor, quoting the book of Leviticus. And he says, every law, every prophetic word you can bring me, they have to match up to 1 in 1A, or they just don't matter. So when somebody comes and says, women shouldn't teach in the church, love God, love your neighbor as yourself, that's not congruent with the law that Jesus laid down. That's not congruent with the heart request that Jesus makes of us if we claim to be Christians, followers of Jesus. And so we could say, like, love my neighbor. That's pretty easy. My neighbor seems like a pretty cool person as I raise up my electric garage door, drive in, and wave at them as the door is coming down. Loving my neighbor is pretty easy. So I got that. And then Jesus decided to make it a lot more difficult for us. And let's look at how he did that in Matthew 5. Matthew 5 is the Sermon on the Mount. It's where the Beatitudes come from. It's this really significant sermon that was recorded from Jesus, probably one that Jesus would speak on a regular basis for those that claim to be followers of Rabbi Jesus, or as we would call them today, Christians. Again, let me keep reiterating, if you want to claim to be a Christian, you have to follow the teaching of Jesus. So he said, the law is love your neighbor as yourself. But then he goes farther in Matthew 5 and he says, now you've heard it said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy, which was kind of a common idiom or axiom of the day, that it was okay, we had to love our neighbor, but that person that was from a different race or religion or nationality, we weren't quite as responsible to them. Love your neighbor, hate your enemy. But verse 44 of Matthew 5, Jesus says, but I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be sons of your Father who is in heaven. Jesus here is saying, if you are as righteous as you believe yourself to be, and your community and your religious system and your church that you go to every Sunday, the demonstration is this: love God, love your neighbor as yourself. And I'm telling you that loving your enemies is what loving your neighbor looks like. Those that persecute you, if you pray for them, then you are demonstrating that you're a follower of Jesus, not before. So he says, and that's what makes you a son of the Father. And Jesus goes on to say this: for God makes the sun rise on the evil and on the good, and sends rain on the just and the unjust. For if you love those who love you, what reward do you have? If you only love your family and want to bless them for generations and don't give a damn about other people, what reward do you have in heaven? How are you demonstrating a love for God? If those people of that other race, or that other religion, or that other nationality, or that other country don't deserve the same goodness of God as you, what reward do you have? How are you demonstrating that you love God or are a follower of Jesus? You are not. You have now said, my culture is supreme to other cultures. And you are a believer in the supremacy of your culture. You are a white supremacist at that point. For if you love those who love you, what reward do you have, said Jesus. Do not even the tax collectors do the same? He's saying, if you only love those who love you, how are you any better than the worst people in your culture? You think those tax collectors are evil. I'm saying if you only love those who love you, you're the same as that guy. And if you greet only your brothers, verse 47, what more are you doing than others? Do not even the Gentiles do the same? Do not even people of other religions that you don't believe are righteous as you do that? We might say today, do not even, the communists love their own family. Whatever. You pick the marginalized community that you hate and you insert it in there. Do not even the Gentiles do that. You, therefore, must be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect. So Jesus said, if you consider yourself righteous, a follower of mine, you don't justify evil acts about saving property. You don't say, well, Kyle Rittenhouse is a hero because he was defending property with a killing weapon, and by God, I'm happy those two people are dead. You cannot call yourself a follower of Jesus and hold that belief system, in my opinion. You don't justify evil acts by enticing a fight and then calling it self-defense when you kill them. You don't justify evil acts because they occurred against bad people. Those people were felons. One of them was even on the pedophile list. Yes, pedophilia is horrible, and we must protect our children from it at all times. But that does not give me the right to kill somebody and justify it because, oh, he's a bad person. If you only love those who love you or you believe are worthy of God's favor, how are you any better than the worst in culture? And you don't justify evil acts because they were something bad, because of something bad happening to you. Self-defense is not a highly valued character trait in the teachings of Jesus. Back to what Jesus taught is if we all become self-sacrificial to one another, that's how a culture will be elevated. And so if we're elevating self-defense, 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 Second Amendment, give me my gun to protect myself, something is a disconnect in our following of the teachings of Christ. And I know this is a hard teaching for some of you, but let those with ears to hear it, and eyes to see it, and be willing to challenge your heart. Could I be a believer in the supremacy of my culture? Could I be a white supremacist? And by the way, you don't have to be Caucasian to be a believer in a white supremacist. If you believe American culture makes us better and more worthy of God's blessing than others, that is a supremacist belief system. So let me go further. Jesus then goes farther to say, if you believe that you only have to love those who love you, you're bad. Now let me tell you, those that you despise worse than anybody on the planet, you have to love them, or you're not a follower of mine, nor are you a follower of God. And I'll talk more about that in just a second. I hope you guys will give me a minute here. Sorry, let me look to share that if you enjoy what I do, you can help me financially. And we do that through subscriptions that we sell on my website at pastor-paul.com. For those of you watching on YouTube, you can just point your camera at the QR codes on the screen. And the one on the lower right will take you to my website, where if you hit that support Pastor Paul link, for $5.99 a month, you can become a part of the Pastor Paul support community and just help me continue to do teachings like this and the work that I do through TikTok and YouTube and my website, pastor-paul.com. Or if you just want to give a one-time gift, you can point your camera at the Venmo QR code there, and it'll take you to my Venmo page, which is Paul-Swearingen-1. And you can do that there. But my website is pastor-paul.com. And for those of you watching on other resources, you can go to the link tree in my bio. Thank you for those on TikTok who are sending the likes and sharing this live, following my page. All of those things help promote the work that I do here. And I do have children that need to eat, and this is my business. It's what I do. It's my for-profit business, by the way, for which I pay taxes just like everybody else does through my payroll, because I want to be a part of helping my community to be great. So I help pay taxes for schools and roads and public safety, just like everybody else. And because I want to talk about current events and cultural events, which include politics, then I don't want to violate a 501c3 covenant. So even though I'm a licensed minister, I don't want to go a tax-free route because I don't want to violate tax laws like most of our evangelical right-wing churches in America do these days. I just want to be, so you don't get a tax deduction for giving to me because I don't pass the plate, I don't take tithes, and I'm not beholden to donors. But I do ask that you help support the work we do for $5.99 a month or more by going to pastor-paul.com. And all of that info is in the link tree in my bio. Or if you're watching on YouTube, you can just point your phone right at the QR codes and it'll take you right there. And thank you for all the hearts and likes on TikTok right now as well. Would you help by going to pastor-paul.com? It would mean a lot to me if you did. And one other thing I want to show is what we do in the Pastor Paul community is we pursue emotional and spiritual well-being together. And on YouTube, you can see what our weekly Pursuing Spiritual Life Together schedule looks like. We do a mindfulness moment on Wednesday morning. That's a time of contemplation and prayer together. Thursday, we have the release of the Post-Evangelical podcast. Saturdays is Pastor Paul's Bible Talk. And then we have Sunday community together on Sunday. For people who have lost their church community or had to walk away, come join us on Sunday morning. Take communion with us on Sunday morning. We don't require you be a Christian or share in our beliefs. Just be willing to be connected to people and be in community together. And that happens on Sunday mornings in our Sunday community. And all of that info for all of it is in the link tree in my bio or on my website at pastor-paul.com. Love it. Come join us throughout the week. All right, so back now to this idea of WWJD. What would Jesus do about white supremacy in the church? And you may have just joined and you're like, oh, crap, wait a second. White supremacy in the church. I reject the idea outright that there's white supremacy in the church, but we've been making the point through the demonstration of the Christian support of Kyle Rittenhouse, that if we believe protecting property makes it worthy of us to end human life, that if we believe because of past sins of the people who were killed, that justifies the killing and hero worship of Kyle Rittenhouse, or if we ultimately just believe, hey, if you're an American, you believe the same way as we do, then you need to start challenging yourself to the idea of, could I have bought into an idea that my culture is supreme to others? And one of the things I've learned through this season that's been jarring for me is this, and I think it's a truth of me. Somebody told me this. You white people believe that you don't even have a culture. You don't think there is such thing as a white culture in America. You just think you are the culture, that everybody should be like you. And not only here in America, but all of the world, you send missionaries to teach people to be like you, white Christians, often white evangelicals. And we don't believe that we're white supremacists. We don't believe that we're cultural supremacists. We have spent billions of dollars to send missionaries around the world to teach people how to be white Christians. And maybe that needs to pique our heart in this season to say, have I bought into a belief that my culture is supreme to others? And could that be a sin against the heart of Jesus? And I say, yes, it is a sin against the heart of Jesus. We demonstrated that in Matthew 22, where Jesus said, this is the law, love God, love your neighbor as yourself. And then in Matthew 5, he said that if you only love those who love you and don't love your enemies and love those who persecute you, how are you any better than the worst person in your culture, or that person of another race or nationality or religion that you don't think is as good as you? So Jesus condemned a belief in our cultural supremacy right off the bat in that. And now he's going to take it to another level as he's going to bring it to the issue of race and nationality and religion. We may say, well, I don't believe that my race is better. But I do believe you have to become a Christian or you're going to hell. So if you hold that belief, what does that mean of how you treat other people? Jesus then began to rebuke that belief system in Luke chapter 10 with the parable of the Good Samaritan. And I'm not going to read the whole thing. You can go read it on your own. Many of you may already know the story of that parable of the Good Samaritan. But what happened is then another person comes and says, "Teacher, what must I do to inherit eternal life?" And that was a discussion. Now, eternal life in first century Jerusalem didn't necessarily mean going to heaven for all of eternity. It meant doing what I needed to do to transcend the generations, that what I would do would be known beyond the generations in which I lived to the third and fourth generation. The concept of going to heaven and putting our toes in the eternal lake of glory forever worshiping Jesus wasn't really a concept. Inheriting eternal life meant to be transcendent of my generation and my culture. And so what must I do to inherit an eternal life? If I were to ask an evangelical that today, they would say, well, let me lead you in a sinner's prayer and let me invite you to my church this Sunday. That isn't what Jesus demonstrated. However, you're not being a Christian, a Christ follower, if that is your answer to the question, because here's what Jesus said. He begins to tell the story of the Good Samaritan. And in verse 26 of Luke 10, Jesus says to the man, "What is written in the law?" You're asking me how to inherit eternal life. Don't you know the scripture? He says, "What is written in the law? How do you read it?" He asked the man, and the man answered in verse 27, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength and with all your mind." He repeats Jesus' command from Matthew 22, and he says, "And love your neighbor as yourself." So he repeats what we started this lesson with, as the man asking the question of how do I inherit eternal life? And Jesus says, okay, we agree on that. Good job. That's what you have to do. Love God, love your neighbor as yourself. And so the man begins to think then, okay, if I have to love my neighbor, who I do, I wave at them as I go inside my garage and put my garage door down. I love my neighbor. But the man starts to think, hey, maybe this is a trick question or a trick answer I'm getting from Jesus here. And so he wants to know a little bit more. And he says, who is my neighbor? If I have to love my neighbor, tell me who my neighbor is. And he's also asking, and by the way, what can I use as a guideline to disqualify some of the people that I don't want to love? And so Jesus, as Jesus is so wont to do in the text that we're reading, tells a story, and the story of the Good Samaritan, a story about a man who's traveling from Jerusalem to Jericho, finds a man who's been beaten on the side of the road and stops to help. And this is after two of the good people in culture didn't stop. One even went on the other side of the road to avoid the beaten man. But here along comes the Samaritan in Jesus' telling of the story, and he stops and helps the man, gives money out of his own pocket to take care of the man who's been beaten on the side of the road. Now, the historical context of the story that Jesus is telling here, or the writing we have here, is that road from Jerusalem to Jericho was known to be a very perilous journey. Jesus did use current events. I have people sometimes like, Pastor Paul, why are you talking politics? Because I'm using current events to show our hearts in this season, particularly the evangelical church that has married itself to a political party. Let's use current events to display our heart. And today I'm using this worship and adulation of Kyle Rittenhouse and the joy that white Christians have, or white cultural Christians have, that Kyle Rittenhouse killed two people and shot another, and how we're inviting him for adulation in events like Turning Point USA, where you're going to have nothing but white people in the audience, or white cultural people, and a lot of Christians saying, Kyle's my man. He's my hero because he killed two people while defending property. And do you know those two people are evil and they don't believe the way that we do and they're bad. And so it's good. I'm happy. Kyle's a hero that he killed those men. And I'm asking the question today, if Jesus were here in the flesh and you claim to be a follower of Jesus, could you make that claim that Kyle Rittenhouse is a hero to you and you still be able to say, I'm a follower of Jesus Christ? And I think the answer is you cannot, that those are a disconnect. And so Jesus is using this current event of the road from Jerusalem to Jericho to use current events. And here come the people of the religious sect that prized worship. Love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. I love God so much, I'm going to go on the other side of the road so as to avoid this man that could be dead. Because you know what? If you touched a dead person, you weren't allowed to participate in the religious community for a period of time. So I love God so much, I'm going to demonstrate it by going to the other side of the road. And Jesus would say, if you have an offense with another human being and you're at the altar to worship with your offering, you should leave your offering at the altar and go fix it with the other person before worshiping God. So that idea, like, look at how holy I am. I want a pedophile to be dead so the world will be a better place. But we hate that pedophile as a human being. And again, I'm in no way saying I think pedophiles should be punished to the fullest extent of the law. But if we use that as a justification, I am morally right and they're morally wrong, as a justification to hate people and to be thrilled that two activists at a BLM event were killed, we need to check where we're coming from in our heart. Here comes the Samaritan after the holy guys have already walked by. The Samaritan. Now, let me tell you who the Samaritans were in the context of the story. They were people of mixed race. Some were maybe half Jewish or part Jewish and had been a part of intermarriage between the people of Israel and other races, and particularly while the people of Israel had been taken into captivity into other lands, there were Canaanites that came in and intermarried with the Jewish people that were left behind, and they had created sort of this new race and these people that had a new religion called the Samaritans. And because they had stolen the land of the people of Israel, because they had corrupted their religion with this sort of mixed race religion. And even there had been an incident where the Samaritans had desecrated the temple. The people of Jesus' race and nationality felt very justified to hate the Samaritans. And here Jesus takes these most hated of people and makes them the hero of a story to demonstrate, how do I inherit eternal life? Jesus says, you want to inherit eternal life, be like that person that you hate, that you think doesn't deserve God's favor. And he makes these hated people the hero of the story. And at the end of it, Jesus says this to the man: which of the three that walked by the man do you think was a neighbor to that man who had fallen into the hands of robbers? And the expert in the law, it says, replied, the one who had mercy on him. In reading that, the one who had mercy on him, he couldn't even bring himself to say the Samaritan was the good neighbor. He couldn't even let that word come out of his mouth. So he just says, the one who had mercy on him. And Jesus says to him, go and do likewise. He says, go and be like that Samaritan. Go and be like that person that you don't think deserves the favor of God. Guys, cultural supremacy is not just the guys in the white hoods from the 50s, the 40s, and the 20s. White supremacy is anytime we believe our culture is supreme to somebody else's culture and gives us a reason to consider ourselves above them. If I'm believing that people should join my culture to be in right relationship with God. You have to come to my church to be in right relationship with God. We are believing our culture to be supreme. If we are believing that you have to be a part of my right wing partisan belief system and vote for right wing partisan leaders to be right with God, you have bought into a cultural supremacy that can be interpreted to be white supremacy. If you can say those people don't have equal opportunity in our culture, those people, if you say those people, by the way, that's probably a good indicator that there's some white supremacy in you right there. But if you can say those people don't deserve the same access to opportunity as I have because they have fatherless children, or the men don't stay at home like they do in our culture, or they have more babies out of wedlock. All of these things, by the way, I have been told by people close to me who declare themselves to be Christian. If you can say any of those things, you have bought into a cultural supremacy that looks like white supremacy. If you've ever thought it was a good idea to send missionaries around the world to teach them how to be us, I'm not talking about missionaries who go and help build schools and do all those things. We can go to other countries and help. But if we start to become the white savior and say, let us show you how to look like us, because our culture is the godly one, our culture is the supreme one, it's how we justified wiping out indigenous people in North America because they didn't have the cultural superiority, the godliness of our culture, and we justified wiping them out. This is how we justified putting American citizens into prison camps during World War II because they looked Japanese, because they were descendants of a culture that wasn't godly like ours. They were a threat to us. And so therefore we justified putting them into prison camps. One that was located just 3 blocks from where I live. And if I don't look at that and say, we will never let that happen again, ever, because it was damn wrong, and then to do the same at the border today and say, I want to do that to those people because they're a threat to me, I have bought into a supremacy belief in my culture that is a violation of the teachings of Jesus. I cannot say I am a Christian following the teachings of Christ. I believe it to the bottom of my soul. And you may say, well, we have to have laws, we have to have a border. I say it's way more important we have a heart that says, I will never, ever allow families to be separated and kids put in cages and us to do the terrible things we do. Because you know why? It allows us to start to justify terrible things. And in the name of our cultural superiority and our belief in our godliness, we have fought unjust wars and killed many people around the world and made the world not a better place because we believed any war we would fight had to be holy. We have created terrible dynamics around the world, as well as killing human beings, justified to ourselves because we believe that our culture is heaven blessed and supreme to other cultures. And it's time for us to say, we will not fucking do that again. And excuse me if you're worried more about the fact that I just dropped an F-bomb than the fact that we've unjustly killed people around the world in our name. I've heard it justified so many times in our churches. Oh, they took our buildings down on 9/11. If we didn't get revenge on somebody, then anybody would just think they could knock our buildings down. And so we just picked a country. I don't know, Iraq. They seem like pretty easy. Let's go bomb them to make ourselves feel better and justified. And it was wrong. It was horribly wrong. I read recently that somewhere, maybe as many as 300,000 innocent civilian Iraqis died because we went to war under false pretenses, under a Christian president and a Christian vice president with a Christian cabinet. And we don't even blink an eye to think about it today. because we're not followers of Christ in our heart. We still believe in the supremacy of our culture justifying what we do. And we need to have our hearts broken by the words of Jesus and say, oh, God, have mercy on us, if we truly are believers in the command to love God and love your neighbor as yourself, and understand that Jesus then say, if you only love those around you, how are you better than the worst sinners in culture? And then he took it farther to say, and oh, by the way, your neighbor is that person of another race, of another nationality, of another religion that you believe doesn't deserve the favor of God. And then I have people come on my page and say, you're the racist for talking about race. And I say, oh my goodness, God have mercy on us. If you're not willing to consider that you might be the racist in the room, you need to have your heart softened to say, at least let me consider the possibility that I've bought into something that I don't want to be a part of. If you're not willing to consider that our religious system today, through its, this is going to hurt some people, man-made rules, that people that look at sexuality or gender differently than us are not as favored by God as us, you may have bought into a cultural supremacy that isn't like Jesus. And if you're not willing to consider that our religion has greatly supported white supremacy throughout the decades in America, you may just be ignorant of history and may not understand our desire to believe that our culture is supreme over others. If you don't believe the church has been a part of racism in America, then all you need to understand is that there is a reason there's a Southern Baptist church. It's because white people didn't want to sit in pews with black people. There's a reason there's an Assemblies of God, because white people didn't want to sit in pews with black people. Even Billy Graham, who was amazing in desegregating his tent revivals, when he saw MLK doing his work and Malcolm X doing their work, and thought, no, I want to be the white moderate and say, I agree with your premise, but I don't agree with your methods. He became a part of the cultural supremacy of the white American evangelical church and didn't end well in that. And clearly his children are carrying on his belief that the white evangelical culture is the superior, the supreme culture in America today, and now have married that culture with a political party that is openly saying, we're against people that don't look like us, even saying it out loud. We're afraid they're trying to replace us in America, or as their favorite news guy, Tucker Carlson, would say, we love your European white culture. Why shouldn't we try to hold on to it in the country? And I would say the reason we don't do that is because it is a sin by the very Bible we claim to follow. God sent Jonah to preach at an enemy nation. And Jonah tells us, I didn't want to go preach because I knew you were going to have mercy on those people, God. And he still sat back and hoped that God would destroy his enemies because they didn't deserve God's favor. And when God didn't blow up that country, he said, God, I would rather be dead than live in a world where you have mercy on those people. Every Christian should read Jonah chapter 4 and put themselves in Jonah's body and say, would I rather be dead than God have mercy on the Democrats, or have mercy on AOC, or mercy on Nancy Pelosi, or mercy on Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, and see the condemnation of God in that passage of Jonah chapter 4, saying, Jonah, do you do well to think this way? And my evangelical friends are saying, God, we prophesied that Trump was going to win a second term. What happened? And God is trying to say to us, you care about that nonsense. And you think I'm not supposed to care about the people you hate? You're crazy. You think I'm not supposed to care about those who see gender and sexuality differently than you? You're nuts. Do you do well to believe this way? And he would say today, do you do well to believe in the supremacy of your culture? Do you do well to coddle and carry white supremacy through a partisan belief system? And sadly, in reading the comments on my social media pages, I think many would say, I'd rather be dead, God, than live in a world where you love those people. And if you're to this point in this Bible talk and still with me, I hope that means your heart is soft enough to look in the mirror and ask yourself that question. Is it I, Lord? Am I a white supremacist? A great book I've read in this, and I'll finish with this and we'll be done, is this Jesus and the Disinherited, a book written in the 30s by a man named Howard Thurman, talking about how Jesus, a part of an oppressed class, turned and looked at how his oppressed class were the oppressors of others. And every Christian should read this and say, if I'm out there screaming that I'm oppressed because Starbucks doesn't put Merry Christmas on the cups, I ought to read this book, because the oppressed become the oppressor. If we're not careful, we're always looking for somebody else to oppress. But I wanted just to read this one little paragraph from this that talks about how we live together in the middle of all of this. And it's none of the nonsense that you guys tell me. I'm saying nonsense instead of BS because I really would much rather put the heavier word on it. But none of the BS of I don't see race. Bullshit, you do. You can't help it. And if you're saying that, you can only be saying that from a place of privilege, that race doesn't impact your life on a daily basis. So we need to hear the words of Howard Thurman, who says this: you must abandon your fear of each other and fear only God. You must not indulge in any deception or dishonesty, even to save your lives. Your words must be yea, nay. Anything else is evil. Hatred is destructive to the hated and is destructive to the hater alike. Love your enemy, that you may be children of your Father who is in heaven. Wow. Jesus didn't say, to be my follower, you become a partisan pro-lifer. He didn't say, to be my follower, you vote a particular way or you hate a particular group of people. No, those are anti-Christ beliefs. To be a follower of Jesus, you have to love the ones you put in the name in the blank that you think don't deserve God's favor. You have to love the men killed by Kyle Rittenhouse as much as you love supporting Kyle Rittenhouse. You have to love the BLM people who maybe maybe it did turn into riots in some place, but we need to stop and say, why are you so upset, before we get upset at your methods? Or else we become the white supremacist. So the solution is to understand, if I love God, that's going to be displayed in how I treat those people. It's if I understand that God loves my enemies passionately. And when I speak of God, I'm speaking of God in the evangelical context. Many of us are seeing God in a different context, but I'm talking about from the evangelical scriptures. And if God is who evangelicals believe God to be, that God loves every person you hate way more than you love your children, your spouse, your family, your neighbor. So the solution is to repent. Now, repent doesn't mean say a prayer and say, I'm sorry. Repent means to change your mind and turn and go in the opposite direction. And Say, I repudiate white supremacy at its core, and I will have nothing to do with it. And I will be willing to accuse myself of it so that I can see anything in my heart that I don't want to be there. Sit with people who are of a different race, nationality, religion, political party than you, and say, I want to hear your story. None of that love the sinner, hate the sin bullshit nonsense. Sit with them and say, I want to hear your story because I value you as a human being. I value you as a creation of heaven. And then God can say, you do well. And Jesus would say, now, through that demonstration, you are a Christian, a follower of me, not in any other way. And that's my Bible talk for today. Hey, if you appreciate what I do, I would appreciate if you help financially in all of this. I don't pass the offering plate or take up tithes or do any of those things. Thanks for the love. I'm getting on TikTok over here. I sell subscriptions on my website, pastor-paul.com. It's a new website. It's still being tweaked and worked on, but I'm letting you in on the secret that it's out there. If you're watching on YouTube, just point your camera at the screen. That lower right-hand QR code will take you to the website. And if you sign up at just $5.99 a month, you get my novel in audiobook version. You get exclusive commentaries from me. You get access to my community chat board, all of those things. And then there's other ways you can get an autographed copy of my book. You can get one-on-one time with me. So go check it out, would you? Pastor-paul.com. I pay taxes on all my income. I'm not a not-for-profit, even though I'm a licensed minister, and I could be if I wanted to be. I just want to bless the community with doing these things. Check out the coaching services that I provide, all those things that help me continue to do work like this. I'd really appreciate it and love you for it. Thank you for joining me on my Bible Talk WWJD. What would Jesus do about white supremacy in the church? I hope this information, this message is delivered from love in my heart and energy to you and comes off as love. We'll see you again soon on Pastor Paul's Bible Talk and all the other things we do to pursue the emotional and spiritual well-being of the 21st century life. Have a good day.